You know how some sounds just live inside you forever? Not music, not laughter, not even the voice of someone you loved. I'm talking about a voice that shaped you, a voice that built you from the inside out, brick by brick, until you became someone your own mother barely recognized. For thousands of men who served in the British Royal Guard, that voice belongs to one man, Colour Sergeant Edmund Hollies. And I swear to you, even now, 20 years after I last stood on that parade square at Wellington Barracks, I still hear him. Sometimes when I'm tying my shoes. Sometimes when I'm cooking eggs at 5 in the morning because my body still refuses to sleep past 4. Sometimes, when I see a young soldier in uniform on the tube, his voice rises up in my chest like a ghost that never asked permission to stay. Stand still, lad. The world doesn't move for you, you move with it. That was Hollies. That was the voice. My name is Thomas Wren. I joined the Guards in the autumn of 1999. I was 19 years old, skinny as a fence post, and convinced I was tougher than I actually was. My father had served. My grandfather had served. There was a photograph above our fireplace of my granddad in his bearskin, standing outside St. James's Palace, looking like he could chew through stone. I wanted to be in that photograph. I wanted my son, one day, to look up at a mantelpiece and see me the way I saw him. That was the plan, anyway. The first time I saw Colour Sergeant Hollies, it was raining. Not the soft, polite rain you sometimes get in London. The kind of rain that comes sideways and finds every gap in your collar. The parade square was slick. The other recruits were lined up shoulder to shoulder, all of us trying to look like men when most of us were still boys pretending. He walked out from the office. Just walked. Didn't march. Didn't strut. Walked like a man who'd been walking the same path for 30 years and didn't need to prove anything to the puddles. He was not a huge man. That surprised me. I'd expected a giant. Hollies was maybe 5'10", lean, with gray at his temples and a jaw that looked like it had been chiseled out of an old church wall. His uniform was perfect. Not just clean. Perfect. Like the rain itself respected him enough not to touch the wool. He stopped about 10 feet in front of us. He didn't shout. That was the first thing that scared me. A man who shouts is angry. A man who doesn't shout is patient. And patient men, in my experience, are the most dangerous kind. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice was low, even. It carried across that square like a stone dropped in still water. "You are not soldiers yet. You are not guards yet. You are not anything yet. You are clay. And I am the man who decides what shape you take." Nobody moved. He walked the line slowly, stopped in front of a tall boy from Newcastle whose name I never quite learned, looked at him for what felt like an hour. The boy's lip trembled once, just once. "Eyes forward, son," Holly said, quiet, almost gentle. "Your mother isn't here, your girlfriend isn't here, your dog isn't here. The only thing here is me and the work. You'll learn to love the work or you'll learn to leave." The boy nodded. "Don't nod at me," Holly said. "Speak." "Yes, Colour Sergeant." "Better." He moved on. I remember thinking, he hasn't even raised his voice and I'm already terrified. And I remember thinking in the same breath, I want this man to know my name. I don't know why, but I want him to know it. The first week broke a lot of us. 3 lads quit by Wednesday. Another 2 by Friday. One of them, a stocky kid from Birmingham called Davies, walked off the square in tears after Hollies made him polish his boots for the 3rd time in one morning. I heard him later in the barracks, crying into his pillow, saying his dad was going to disown him. Hollies didn't comment on the leavers. He didn't celebrate. He didn't mourn. He just continued. "Foot drill," he said on Monday. "If you cannot stand still, you cannot guard the sovereign. If you cannot guard the sovereign, you have no business in this uniform. We will stand still until your bones remember what your minds forget." We stood for 40 minutes. 40 minutes doesn't sound like much. Try it sometime. Try it in the rain. Try it with a pack on your back and a rifle in your hands and a man like Holly's walking behind you, breathing slow, saying nothing. A lad called Pearson fainted, just went down. His knees buckled and he hit the gravel with a sound I'll never forget, that wet smack of a body giving up on itself. Holly's crouched beside him, loosened his collar, held his head up gently like a father with a sick child. Then he stood, brushed his trousers, and said to the rest of us, "He is not weak. He is unprepared. There is a difference. Pearson will learn, so will you. Back to attention." And we went back. That was Holly's. He could break you in the morning and rebuild you by lunch. He never hated us. He never loved us either. He saw us, I think, the way a stonemason sees a block of granite, not as friends, not as enemies, as something that with enough work could one day become a wall. I want to tell you about the voice now, the actual voice, because that's the part that survives. Most instructors shout. They yell themselves hoarse. By the end of a course, they sound like they've been gargling barbed wire. Not Holly's. Holly's never strained. His voice came from somewhere deep, somewhere settled, like a bell rung inside a cave. When he said your name, it landed. Rend. That was all. Just my surname. The first time he said it, I'd been standing in formation for an hour and my mind had drifted, the way young minds do, to a girl I knew back home. A girl called Susan with freckles and a laugh like breaking glass. Rend. I snapped back so hard, I nearly bit my tongue. Yes, Color Sergeant. Where were you? On the square, Color Sergeant. He stepped closer, not threatening, just close. No, he said. Your body was here. Your mind was elsewhere. Bring it back. The Queen does not need half a man at her gate. She needs a whole one. He moved on. That was it. No punishment, no press-ups, no screaming. But I never drifted again. Not in 12 years of service. Not once. Because his voice was already inside me, monitoring the doors, checking the windows. He had built a small version of himself in my head, and that version never slept. By the second month, we started to understand him. There was a rhythm to Holly's. He woke at 4. He ran 6 miles before breakfast every single day, regardless of weather. He polished his own boots. He pressed his own uniform. He drank his tea black, no sugar, in the same chipped mug, and he never, never sat down before noon. We watched him the way you watch a wild animal you've started to trust, carefully, quietly, hopping not to spook him. One morning, a lad called Marsh asked him, very nervously, how long he'd been in the Guards. Holly's looked at him for a long moment. Long enough to have buried friends, he said. Long enough to know the difference between a soldier and a man playing dress-up. Why do you ask? Marsh swallowed. Just curious, Color Sergeant. Curiosity is fine, Holly said. But curiosity that does not serve your duty is just gossip. Get back to work. That was the closest any of us ever came to a personal conversation with him in those early weeks. He gave us nothing of himself. He demanded everything of us. And slowly, and I mean very slowly, we started to become something. I remember the day my drill clicked. It's strange, but it happens like that. For weeks, your feet feel like blocks of wood. Your arms swing wrong. Your timing's off. You feel like a clown in a uniform, and every other lad on the square looks more natural than you. And then one day, your body just knows. It was a Tuesday, gray sky, light wind. We were practicing the slow march, that ceremonial pace that looks almost theatrical to anyone watching but feels like meditation when you're doing it. Step, pause, step, pause. The bearskin balanced on your head like an idea you have to believe in. I was in the second row. Holly's was watching from the side. And suddenly, I don't know how to explain this, my feet found the rhythm. My arms swung true, my breathing slowed. The wool of my tunic stopped scratching. The weight of the rifle stopped registering. I was just moving, like the square and I had reached some quiet agreement. When we halted, Hollis walked over. He stopped in front of me, looked at my boots, then at my face. "Rend." "Yes, Color Sergeant." "You found it." "Color Sergeant. The thing you were looking for, you found it just now. Did you feel it?" I hesitated. Then I said, "Yes, Color Sergeant, I felt it." He nodded just once. "Hold on to it," he said. "It will leave you sometimes. When it does, remember this morning, remember the cold, remember the sky, remember that your body once knew. It will know again." He moved on. I tell you, I have been hugged by my father, kissed by my mother, held by women I loved. None of those moments ever made me stand taller than that single sentence on a wet Tuesday morning in 1999. You found it. There's something I should tell you about Hollis that nobody outside the regiment ever really understood. He cared. I know that sounds strange. He was hard. He was relentless. He could carve a man down to nothing in 3 sentences. But underneath that, and you only saw it if you stayed long enough, there was a deep, almost painful care for the lads under his command. I saw it once late at night, when I was on guard duty outside the barracks. A young recruit, I think his name was Coombs, had been struggling. His mother was dying back in Norfolk. He hadn't told anyone. He'd been trying to push through, but you could see it in his eyes during drill. The lights were on, but no one was driving. That night around 11, I saw Hollis walk across the courtyard. He went to the recruits' block. He didn't bang. He didn't shout. He just knocked twice, gently. Coombs opened the door. I couldn't hear what they said. They stood in the doorway for maybe 10 minutes. Hollis did most of the talking. Quiet, low, the way you talk to a horse that's been spooked. At one point, he put his hand on the boy's shoulder, just briefly, just once. Then he walked away. The next morning, Coombs was granted compassionate leave. He went home. He held his mother's hand for 3 days before she passed. He came back 2 weeks later, finished training, and served 8 honorable years before leaving to become a teacher. I never told anyone what I saw that night. Hollis would have hated that. He didn't do those things for the story. He did them because, somewhere underneath all that iron, there was a man who remembered what it felt like to be 19 and frightened and far from home. I'll end this part with the moment I really understood him. It was passing out parade. Months of work behind us, families in the stands, sun for once instead of rain. We marched in our best uniforms, boots gleaming, eyes forward, every man of us transformed from the boys we'd been. After the parade, there's a moment where the recruits break formation and find their families. Hugs, photographs, tears sometimes. I was looking for my mother and father in the crowd when I saw Hollis standing at the edge of the square, alone, hands behind his back, watching us. He wasn't smiling, but his eyes, and I'll never forget this, his eyes were wet. Just for a second, just for a heartbeat. Then he blinked, turned, and walked back toward the office. I never told anyone, not even my dad, not even my wife years later. But I think about it often. I think about it every time I hear that voice in my head all these years later. The voice that taught us how to stand, how to march, how to suffer in silence, how to be men. The voice that, even now, when I'm tying my shoes at 5 in the morning, still says, "Stand still, lad. The world doesn't move for you, you move with it." And I do. I still do. There's a story about Color Sergeant Hollis that the old lads still tell when they meet up at the regimental dinners. Most of them weren't there. Most of them heard it from someone who heard it from someone. But I was there. I saw it with my own eyes. And I've never been able to tell it properly because the telling never matches the feeling. I'll try now. It happened in the summer of 2001. June, I think. The kind of London afternoon where the heat sits in your bearskin like a second head, and your tunic clings to your shoulder blades, and you'd give your right arm for a single proper breath of cold air. I was 21. I'd been on the Queen's Guard for nearly 2 years. I knew my drill. I knew my post. I knew every cobble and crack on the square outside the palace. I thought I'd seen everything you could see in that job. I was wrong. That morning had started normally. Tourists in their summer clothes, cameras everywhere, a few schoolchildren on a class trip, all in matching yellow caps, pointing at the guards and giggling. Their teacher, a tired-looking woman with a clipboard, kept trying to keep them in a line that wouldn't stay a line. Hollies was on duty that day too. Not as a guardsman, he was too senior for that, but as the supervising NCO. He wandered the perimeter every so often, hands behind his back, checking the men, checking the crowd, checking the angles. He never relaxed, not even for a second. I was at my post outside one of the side gates, standing still, eyes forward. The drill we'd practiced 1,000 times. Every 20 minutes or so, I'd march my section. A short, sharp pattern of steps to keep the blood moving in your legs, then back to stillness. A guard's job sounds boring. To anyone watching, it looks like nothing, standing in a box, holding a rifle, wearing a silly hat. But the truth is, you're watching everything, every face, every bag, every car that slows down too much, every shoe that walks too quickly toward the gate. Hollies had drilled it into us until it was a reflex. Watch the hands, watch the eyes, watch the bags. A bomb does not arrive announcing itself. That afternoon, around 3 o'clock, I saw the man for the first time. He was standing across the road near the railings of the park. Mid-40s, brown jacket, heavy for the weather, a small black holdall at his feet. Not unusual. Tourists carry all sorts of bags, but there was something about him. He wasn't taking photographs. He wasn't pointing. He wasn't talking to anyone. He was just standing, watching us. I noted him the way Hollies had taught us. Note it. Don't fix on it. Don't telegraph that you've seen him. Keep your eyes moving. Come back to him every 30 seconds. See if anything changes. Nothing changed. He stood there for 10 minutes, 20 minutes. The crowd shifted around him. He didn't shift with it. He stayed exactly where he was, like a stone in a river. I started to feel it then. That low hum in the chest. The thing your body knows before your brain does. The thing the old soldiers call the wrong taste in the air. I needed to flag him, but you can't shout from your post. You can't break formation. You wait for the supervising NCO to come within signaling distance, and you give a small, prearranged gesture. I waited. Hollies must have already seen him. That's what I think now, looking back. Because when he came along the line about 5 minutes later, he didn't even pause at my post. He just walked slowly, and as he passed me, he said, without looking at me, without moving his lips much, "I see him, Ren. Hold your post. Don't move." He kept walking. He went round the corner and out of sight. I assumed he was going to radio the police. The procedure for a suspicious individual is clear. You don't engage, you don't approach, you report. But Hollies didn't follow procedure that day. I don't know if he saw something more than I did. I don't know if his instincts, polished over 30 years, were telling him there wasn't time. All I know is what happened next. The man in the brown jacket bent down. Slowly, he unzipped the black holdall. I felt my stomach drop. I felt the rifle in my hand suddenly become very real and very inadequate. I felt the schoolchildren in their yellow caps somewhere behind me, laughing, oblivious. And then I saw Hollies. He was coming around the corner of the railings on the same side of the road as the man. Not running, walking, quick but not panicked. He was maybe 30 feet away from the man and closing. The man's hand went into the holdall. I will tell you, for the rest of my life I will tell you, what happened in the next 4 seconds. It was 4 seconds. I've counted it 1,000 times in my head. Second 1, Hollies covered 10 feet. His pace doubled, still not running, just longer, harder strides. Second 2, the man pulled something out of the bag. I couldn't see what it was, something dark, something solid. Second 3, Holly's was on him. He didn't tackle the man. He didn't swing at him. He simply got hold of the man's wrist, the wrist of the hand holding whatever it was, and he twisted it hard downward, the way you twist a stuck door handle. The object dropped. Second 4, Holly swept the man's legs and pinned him to the pavement, one knee on the back, one hand on the neck. The whole movement looked almost gentle, like he was tucking a child into bed. It wasn't gentle. The man went down with a noise like a sack of flour hitting a counter. For a moment, the world stopped. The tourists noticed. The cameras turned. The schoolchildren in their yellow caps fell silent. Their teacher gasped a real, sharp gasp. Somewhere, a baby started to cry. I stood at my post, eyes forward, the way I'd been ordered, but every nerve in my body was screaming. Holly's looked up, calmly. He caught the eye of one of the police officers who patrolled the area, a constable called Briggs who I'd come to know slightly. Briggs ran over, 2 more officers behind him. Within 10 seconds, the man was in handcuffs and being moved away from the public. Holly stood up, brushed his trousers, adjusted his cuffs, walked back across the road toward us. He didn't look proud. He didn't look shaken. He just looked like a man who'd finished a small job and was returning to the larger one. As he passed my post, he said quietly, "Good eyes, Ren." That was it. Good eyes, Ren. I almost wept on the spot. The object in the bag, it turned out, wasn't a bomb. It was an imitation firearm, a replica, heavy enough to look real, detailed enough to fool you at 10 feet. The man had walked there that day with a plan, but the plan, in the end, mattered less than what it could have done. A replica firearm produced in the middle of a crowd outside Buckingham Palace would have caused a panic. People would have run. People would have been crushed. Children would have screamed for their mothers. It might not have been a bomb, but it could have killed people all the same. The police later said the man had been struggling with his mental health for years. He hadn't planned to hurt anyone, he said. He just wanted attention. He'd wanted someone to notice him. He'd wanted his name in the papers. He got his name in the papers. But Holly's didn't. That's the part I want you to understand. The press never knew. The official report mentioned a member of the supervising staff intervened swiftly to neutralize the situation. No name, no rank. Holly's preferred it that way. He told the regiment in no uncertain terms that he didn't want any commendation. He didn't want any medal. He didn't want any interview. It was my job, he said, when our company commander tried to put him forward for recognition. If you give me a medal for doing my job, what do you give the lads who do extraordinary things? He refused. The regiment, of course, knew. Internally, he was a legend already. But after that day, his name carried a weight that even old colonels would lower their voices around. Outside the regiment, though, the world forgot. The story made the local news for about a day. Then it was gone, replaced by football and weather and politics. But for those of us who'd been on the square that afternoon, the story never went anywhere. I still see it. Every time I walk past Buckingham Palace, every time I see a man with a brown jacket and a black bag, every time I hear a child laugh somewhere behind me and feel that old instinct to scan the crowd. I see Holly's, walking, not running, calm, closing the gap, doing the impossible thing as though it were the simplest thing in the world. That night in the barracks, none of the lads spoke about it for a long time. Not because we'd been told not to. We hadn't been told anything. We just didn't know what to say. There's a kind of silence that comes after a near thing. A silence that respects what almost happened by refusing to dress it up in too many words. Around 10, a lad called Reeves finally said, "How did he know?" We were sitting on our bunks, half out of uniform, polishing our boots out of habit because polishing your boots is a thing you do when your hands don't know what else to do. "How did he know what?" said another lad, Hargreaves. "How did he know to move, before the bag was even open?" Nobody answered. I thought about it for a long time afterwards. I still think about it. The honest answer, I believe, is that Hollies had been watching that man for far longer than I had. Maybe 20 minutes, maybe more. He'd noted the jacket, the bag, the stillness, the lack of camera, the wrong-shaped shadow of the holdall when the man set it down. He'd run 1,000 small calculations in his head while we'd seen him packing the perimeter, hands behind his back, looking like he was just stretching his legs. He wasn't stretching his legs. He was working. Every single second of every single day, that man was working, and we'd had no idea. That's what 30 years of service does. It turns a man into a sensor, a walking, breathing, quiet detector of everything that's just slightly wrong. A few weeks after the incident, I was on guard duty again. Different post, quiet afternoon. Hollies came along the line on his rounds, stopped near my post, looked across at the road where the man had stood that day. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then he said very quietly, almost to himself, "Ren." "Yes, Color Sergeant." "You ever wonder why we do this?" I almost answered. Then I realized the question was rhetorical. He went on, still looking across the road. "Most days we stand, we march, we change post, we look ceremonial. People think we're decoration. They think we're for the tourists. They think the rifles are props." He paused. "And then there's a day like that day, and we are not decoration. We are what we always were. We are the thin red line. We are the men between." He looked at me then. For the first time in 2 years, he really looked at me. "You did well that day, Ren," he said. "You held your post. You did not move. A lesser man would have moved. He would have gone to help. He would have left his post empty. And that empty post would have been the next opportunity. You held. You watched. You trusted your training. That is what guards do." I couldn't speak for a moment. When I did, I said, "Thank you, Color Sergeant." He nodded. "Don't thank me," he said. "Thank the men who trained me. And one day when you're training someone, remember that what you give them, they will give to someone else. The voice does not die. It travels." He walked on. I didn't know it at the time, but that was the last proper conversation I ever had with Edmund Hollies. He retired the following spring. A quiet ceremony, just the regiment, no press. He shook every man's hand. He stopped at mine and said, "Ren, stand still." And he smiled. A small, tight smile, the first I'd ever seen on his face. Then he walked out of the gates and into civilian life. I didn't see him again for nearly 15 years. Life happens the way it does. I served another decade. I made corporal, then sergeant. I trained recruits of my own. And every time I stood in front of a fresh batch of nervous boys with bad haircuts and worse postures, I heard Hollies' voice in my head telling me how to begin. "Don't shout, stand still. Let them feel the silence first." I did what he did. As much as I could. I wasn't him. No one was. But I tried to carry the voice forward the way he'd said. The voice does not die. It travels. I left the Army in 2011 at 31. Married my Susan, yes, the freckles, yes, the laugh. We had 2 boys. I worked in security, then in training, then in a quiet office job that paid the bills and let me sleep through the night. But the voice never left. It was in my hands when I tied my tie. It was in my back when I stood too long at a bus stop. It was in my chest when I saw something wrong on the street and felt myself, without thinking, start to scan. And then in the autumn of 2016, I got a phone call. I want to tell you about that call, but not in this part of the story. Because what came next changed everything I thought I knew about Color Sergeant Edmund Hollies, and it deserves its own telling.